Welcome to the Voices of Fostering podcast. We have a great guest on today. We welcome Ashley Jean-Baptiste. Ashley, your story from foster care to BBC presenter and Cambridge graduate is incredible to read. Could you give us a bit of an insight as to what it was like growing up in foster care to begin with?
Sure. So I was placed into care at around the age of 2. Far too young to remember when I actually went into care. Between the ages of 2 and 18, I was moved about a bit. So I was moved to 4 different foster homes across Southeast London. And I also spent time in residential care, a care home placement, which is very different to living with a foster family. So that's 5 different placements, all before the age of 18. Of course, you don't need to be an expert in psychology or anything like that to know that moving about, not having consistency in your adult relationships, having a transience of foster carers and professionals is not going to be stabilizing. It's not going to be good for your self-esteem. So it was, in parts a quite tough childhood, but there were some incredible individuals, professionals, foster carers in that really troubled sort of journey, who were incredible and made such a positive difference.
That's a lot, isn't it, to begin with? Like you say, before the age of 18. I wondered if you could, you've spoken very warmly in the past. I've seen you in interviews and read parts of your book about some of the foster carers that you grew up with. I wonder if you could tell us about a couple of examples where they really made a difference.
So I can't remember the first time that I was in because I was just so young, but I do remember really vividly my second foster placement. I had a Caribbean foster mum called Joyce. In the book, I call her Joyce. We had to protect their real names for a range of reasons. And she was this Caribbean matriarchal figure. I went to live with her when I was about 4 years old. And she was just the most amazing mothering figure. And I thought I'd spend the rest of my childhood with her. That wasn't the case because I moved around a lot. But the time that I spent there was really formative. Her children were like my aunties and uncles. Because she was elderly, she had a grandson who was like a brother. And I think for all of the movement and turbulence of care in that home, I genuinely felt loved. I genuinely felt like I was part of the family. And I think that really is what you want as a looked after child, to feel like you are a part of a family. And I felt that with Joyce. She was very inclusive. I didn't feel different. I wasn't treated differently. I think about her food. My God, she could chop it up. Caribbean cuisine, she had it down to a patch. It was amazing. Jerk chicken, macaroni and cheese, rice and peas. And, I talk about food when I talk about Joyce because that's what home's about, right? It's about those senses and those tones of home, and her cooking made me feel at home. I have fond memories of Christmases. I can still see her, as a little child, sort of milling around the house, polishing the furniture and just being the most safe kind of maternal figure. So it was tough when I had to leave her, but I will always be grateful for the time that I had with Joyce. And the last home that I lived in as well, so many sort of positive attributes to that home. I had a foster mum and a foster dad. And prior to going to that last home, Tim, I struggled a lot at school, and I had a string of suspensions and being excluded. And that's not remarkable, unfortunately, for many looked after children. But in this home, there was this kind of transfer where I began to do well at school. And so from being a kid who wasn't particularly celebrated for his academic potential, I went on to do well. And that was because of the home and the culture and just speaking positivity over me. They had a daughter who they had raised to really value her education. And I think that was quite inspiring to see. So yeah, that last home was really positive as well, and certainly made a difference in terms of my educational outcome.
I could genuinely see your face light up then when you were talking about Joyce, like it was a real, almost a bit emotive. And I just wondered if you could tell me someone like Joyce or one of the other carers you've experienced, what qualities really make those foster carers special and make you do exactly what you just did, like your face light up?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's quite hard because you don't, first of all, when you are a child, you're not objectively kind of scrutinizing, are you, your parents or your guardians? But looking back, I think inclusivity was a big one with Joyce. Like I felt like I was a part of her family. And I do a lot in this space of the care system now. I've made documentaries about the issue. I meet a whole load of people who work in it, who've been looked after. And not everybody feels included in their homes, but Joyce certainly made me feel included. She was prepared to make me feel part of the family. And also she was just really resilient. Like, when I say resilient, I mean that, there was a lot for her to deal with. She was elderly. She had to have meetings with social services, with professionals. Often there were moments in life where she had to go above and beyond to support me. And that required a real resilience from her. Because as well as, supporting me, she had a grandson and she was a very active grandmother. She was a very active parent to her children. But she just showed up for me in the most remarkable way. And I know that from her, that took a lot of day-to-day resilience, consistency, and I will forever be grateful to her because of that. And that resilience is what I saw in the last family that I lived with as well, right? When I got there, I was still getting suspended from school, but they were so patient with me. They believed in my potential, even when I didn't see it in myself. When I didn't know what my capabilities were, they believed that I could do well at school. They believed that I could, kind of approach it in a positive way. And that showing up for you, that seeing your potential when you can't see it in yourself is really critical, I believe, when it comes to being a life-changing foster parent. And no doubt there will be many people with those qualities who equally have it within themselves to be good foster parents.
What would you say to those people who are listening to this now and thinking, I'd quite like to do it, I'm resilient, I've got the patience? What would you say? What would be your advice?
I'd say 100% do it. Do it. Like, as well as those innate qualities that I think many people naturally have, there are now systems of support, right? And so if there's a particular person considering fostering, they know they have the qualities, but they're still a bit reluctant. Hopefully they're reassured in knowing and learning that there are support systems out there to help people who are new to this. And I always say, if you have the capacity to love a biological child or, a relative, you have the capacity to love a foster child. I just believe it's a very human thing to love a child, irrespective of whether they're your blood or not. And those qualities on display, resilience, care, inclusivity, everything we've spoken about, those qualities can positively shape the life of a child. And I would say to anyone considering foster care that I don't think there's anything more life affirming than seeing the positive difference that you can make in the life of a young person who's vulnerable, who needs your help. I've had a few occasions where I've been able to go back to people who have helped me to thank them, to big them up for all that they have done. And it is the most life affirming thing, not just for me, but for them, to see the positive impact that they've had on me. And so again, to anyone considering fostering, my God, you just don't know how you're going to help a young person. And then that full circle moment of when they thank you, when they are able to credit you for that positive impact, it's just the best thing ever. I know it from my own lived experience.
I mean, you've spoken quite openly about how you've used it as a source of strength, really, being put in as a fostered when you were younger. How do you apply that to your day-to-day life? How do you use that as a strength?
Wow. Well, I think we've said the word resilience a lot, but I think when you are in care and you're navigating moving homes, the realities of leaving care, because that's a real thing. Many leave care at 18 or in their early 20s, and you're having to adapt to adulthood quickly. You have to be resilient, right? And so the resilience that I had to kind of exercise as a looked after child and someone who left care, it's that same muscle that I use throughout my life now, be it in my career as a dad, because I've got two beautiful little girls, in my day-to-day life, like that resilience of showing up when you don't feel like it, dealing with trauma, dealing with challenges. But I'm so grateful for that muscle that I've had of resilience that I had to cultivate as a young person, because it serves me well now. And also, you know, in particular with broadcasting, for a long time, I was quite reluctant to talk about my care experience because I found myself in quite middle class, privileged broadcast spaces. And I somehow thought that lived experience would kind of make me different in a negative way. Over time, I began to realize that it's such a power, actually, because my lived experience allows me to have empathy with all sorts of people in interviews, in documentary making. And there's relatability that I have with certain communities, you know, because of what I've been through. So even in my career as a broadcaster, I began to see my lived experience as a superpower because of the sensitivities it gave me with other people in other communities, which of course, as you know, is critical for interviews. It's critical for being able to get people to open up and to trust you. And I don't think I would have that ability in the same way if not for what I'd been through as a young person.
Yeah, and I think people know when you have that lived experience and when you show genuine empathy. And I think that is very, very apparent in an interview. And in your interviews, you're still very much immersed in this world, Ashley. And I wondered if you could tell me, or if you've stumbled across any stories recently when you were putting together your book of people that genuinely inspired you from this world.
Of the care system. Well, you know, there were so many people that I kind of, when I wrote the book, there was a lot of anxiety actually for a range of reasons. But there was some incredible supporters. Lem Cisse, who is a well-known poet, author, care experienced himself. He was really supportive in just kind of giving a bit of guidance about what it is to write a book that's so personal about a sector as well. Alex Wheatle, the late Alex Wheatle, is an incredible author, fiction and non-fiction. And I've read his work, and I remember he also grew up in care. He lived in residential care for part of his childhood. And I remember DMing him on X back in the day when it was called Twitter, and he was so generous. But you know, just I should also say the response to the book, my God, has been absolutely amazing. It's been out for a year now. Of course, the paperback has just come out, but the amount of messages I get even now on a daily basis they're just so pertinent and so profound. You know, I mean, I got one today from a head teacher who's adopted two girls, and he was a bit just struggling with, you know, the approach of that. And he DM'd me on Instagram to say that the book was just, well, the most sort of, let me get it up because I don't want to butcher the explanation. It's the most moving book he's read. I'm looking at my phone now, and to know that the book is having that impact, even still, for people who are navigating some form of care, that is just the most special thing to me as an author.
How does that make you feel when you sat at home with your kids?
It's the best. And, you know, because nothing is more important than the bond between a caregiver and a child. Be that biological, be that in adoption, be that in fostering or any other form of care. So to know that this book is helping people in those places, in those spaces of care, to know that this book is providing insight, that's providing hope, encouragement, it's the best. I had a 17-year-old say that they messaged me to say that this is the first time that they felt seen in a book. You can't put a price on that. It would be impossible for me to overstate just how meaningful that is to me, because I know what it was like to feel like an isolated, looked after child. And to now know that this book for others is kind of making them feel seen, feel a bit more empowered. My God, I would write the book again and go through the whole process again, knowing that it's having that sort of impact.
Let's just talk about the book quickly. It's called Looked After. It's out now in paperback. You've spoken a little bit about it there, but I wonder what made you want to put these stories and these experiences down on paper as opposed to doing stuff like this, podcast, TV. What's the difference there? How did that shape up for you?
So when you grow up in care, and for anyone who's considering fostering, this is really useful to know. You have professionals who are writing about your life all the time. So as I was growing up, there were social workers who were kind of documenting moments of my life. Teachers would write their records and whatnot. And so on leaving care, I had just endless records that were written about my life and who I was. And at some point in my sort of early adult years, I remember going through some of my records and kind of not recognizing the guy that they'd written about, this boy that they'd written about. My journey, my life was narrated by professionals and actually people that I didn't really know. And this process of writing my book and writing what I remembered, and yeah, there was a bit of corroboration in terms of going back to those files, but me writing this book really was about centering my voice in my narrative and in my journey, and being the central voice of experience. And so really it was kind of reclaiming my power and giving voice to my own journey. And I think that's the powerful thing about being creative, about writing, about being able to talk about things, especially for looked after children and care experienced people, is that using your voice, it kind of centers yourself in your own journey. And many people still going through care don't always feel that sense of ownership of their own story. So it was a really personal thing with quite a personal kind of missions, but to see the broader impact, honestly, is quite unexpected, but yeah, lovely to see.
And very powerful to inspire looked after children who could be reading that. I guess that's maybe quite an emotional thing for you to think about, that could be the case. And also people who are potentially listening to this podcast who want to or are thinking about becoming carers could also be reading it and feeling inspired as well. So I want to thank you for that, Ashley. And it's really powerful you're talking about reading your own notes from your childhood and feeling a bit detached from that. Can we just end on you just how did, when you did that, how did it feel? How were you in that moment? What were you doing, for instance? How did that all look?
So when I left care, I got a council flat. And I remember it was after the union. I was still in that council flat when I read my records, and you kind of apply for them. The local authority takes a while to give them to you because often they'll go through your records and redact things that might be seen to kind of compromise third party privacy or anything like that. So even when I got the records, I wasn't privy to all my information because of safeguarding and editorial kind of boundaries to that. Again, so you don't necessarily feel ownership. It was, I remember just being really tired. It was less like dense or deep emotion. And I was just exhausted from like reading the first like couple years of my journey. I remember words that were negative, but they were words used to describe me at particular junctures of life. And most care experienced people that I've spoken to who have read their files, they will say that their files are not reflective of the essence of who they are. And I think that's true even now. But not just for the young person, but for all the players involved in the life of a child. There's so much more humanity and richness to all of those interactions that sort of clinical files will never convey. And so again, the book really is my attempt to kind of counter that and put more humanity into what I went through. And yeah, hopefully it's it's resonating with care experienced people in particular.
Mate, the humanity is there in abundance. It's called Looked After. It's by Ashley John Baptiste. We're really grateful for you coming on today. Thank you for being so open and honest, Ashley.
Absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Voices of Fostering. If you'd like to find out more, head online and search National Fostering Group and make this the year you foster.